Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar. We're going to give about another minute so we can wait for a few additional people to join, and then we will get started. So we will be right back with you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining JMT Consulting for our webinar on how to improve efficiency with AP automation with Pam Klein from Avid Exchange. At JMT Consulting, we have been implementing best-in-class software for the back office exclusively for nonprofits, large and small, for over 27 years. On the screen, you'll see that we have some upcoming webinars listed that we would love for you to join. You can do so by visiting jmtconsulting.com and clicking on the Events tab. If you have any questions during the webinar, please utilize the questions feature on your toolbar, and Pam will answer at the conclusion of the presentation. Please also note we have set up a poll that will launch later in the webinar so we can learn a little bit more about our audience today. And you will also be receiving a recording of this webinar. So if for some reason you can't make it to the end, don't worry, we will send that out. So with that, I will let Pam take it away and enjoy the webinar.
Well, thanks a million, and I'm so happy to be here today, and thanks everyone for taking some time this afternoon to join us. I've been with Avid Exchange now for a little over 4 years, and I've worked with hundreds of nonprofits. So we've learned a lot about a lot of the challenges that organizations, especially nonprofits, face. And hopefully today what we're looking to share with you are some insights into how efficiencies can be driven and added to the organization through automation. So when we start off this process to really understand what does that look like, what kind of problems are nonprofits facing today when we think about AP, there's a few that come to mind. And first and foremost, we really think about efficiencies. And a good way to think about this is, well, what does it really mean to be inefficient? And usually the culprit behind that is paper. So with AP, inherent in that is receiving a lot of paper. And very often, that paper is going to a lot of different offices or different people within the organization. Very often, AP doesn't even see that invoice. Sometimes they're even waiting for, or they get a phone call from a vendor asking about payment, and they haven't even seen it. We all know that there's a lot of things that happen in the AP process before we can process that invoice for payment. We need approvals. We need to route that around the office. And we need to get all of that data entered into the accounting system. We need to cut checks to get those paid. Maybe we are trying to work on ways to send out electronic payments. A lot of these things are time consuming and really take up a majority of the AP person's day, and therefore we're not really getting utilizing that person's time effectively, where you can really take advantage of helping them be more strategic. So the goal of automation is not necessarily to remove people from the process. AP plays a very important role within the organization. However, when we think about how much time they're spending moving paper around the office and following up on tasks or fixing errors or fixing things in the accounting system, maybe duplicate payments have gone out, or spending time on the phone with a vendor, that is time that can be spent on things that really have a true value to the finance team. Maybe that is keeping vendor data clean in the accounting system. Maybe it is working on helping with budget, reporting, analysis. Maybe that person's role incorporates other things that have higher value to the organization. Other problems exist are trying to grow and scale. As we think about growth, usually one of the things that happen is we start thinking, do I have to bring additional people on? And really, when you think about growth, you want to put that extra money into programs and the services to the constituents that you serve. So people are looking for ways to really streamline processes and utilize technology in ways that you can have a more effective team in place and utilize the resources that you already have. And the right technology allows you to scale, so even as you continue to grow, you don't have to add additional people to the process. And improving internal controls. Now, I'm sure a lot of people that are on this call today have probably just went through an audit or maybe have one coming up and are very familiar with that process. And all the time I hear from folks, I can't talk to you for a month because I'm about to start my audit process. What does that entail? Going through and dusting off some file cabinets, pulling up documentation. Or maybe I'm going online trying to find invoices that maybe I've scanned. Maybe I have an element of electronic filing to help me. However, do I have all of my approvals? Do I have all of my backup documentation? Can I read the information on it? Does a little sticky note still exist that had an important comment of something that I needed? Do I have that audit trail that I need to show that I've taken all the necessary steps to complete all of the approvals and necessary backup that I need to present to my auditors? So when we think about automation, we want to help solve a number of these different problems. So when we think about, again, challenges that are associated with some of these problems and invoices coming in by paper, first of all, we think about lack of visibility into that spend. So let's say I get 50 invoices and maybe they're assorted throughout the office. Different people have them. Maybe a program manager has it sitting on their desk, or maybe I have received that in via email, or maybe I have it received in by mail. I'm putting it in that red folder to pass around the office to get various approvals. What happens, though, once that leaves my desk, I no longer have visibility. And it's not just AP where this is going to impact. There's others in the organization who want to understand cash flow. They want to understand their spend. Budget managers also want to understand where their programs are to date with all of the to-the-minute expenses so they can understand and make decisions for their programs. Lowering costs. All the time we hear that people are really looking to use technology as a way to help reduce the cost of running their organization. And when we think about a manual process, there is a lot of time that's devoted to trying to get an invoice paid. Part of the ROI associated with automation is time savings. However, as we go through this today, there's also hard cost savings that people can recognize and that really help reduce the total cost of utilizing an automation solution. Another challenge is overworked staff, or maybe turnover. Now, we know that a lot of nonprofits work pretty lean. We don't have the luxury of having multiple people in our different departments to be able to assist with all of the different things that need to be done. So very often they're handling multiple jobs within the organization. And what happens is sometimes because we know we have to get something paid, something might be sitting off on the side that's more important, and we're hoping that somebody will get to that, and everyone is trying to rush around, trying to get things done, or trying to get help from someone else within the office. With turnover, I hear all the time that sometimes it's a controller, sometimes it's a CFO who's involved in the actual routing of invoices throughout the office and helping with AP to get things processed. Internal controls are also important. When we think about our audit process and also reporting back to our stakeholders, our funders, we want them to show them that we're good stewards of the funds that they've entrusted with us, and that I have tools in place to mitigate risk, and that I have the right permissions set up so I can give access to the appropriate folks, but that I also have a designated process in place. What happens if somebody does leave? Or maybe somebody who's been doing this for 30 years is decided to retire, and what happens to the process when they leave? All of that information very often goes with them. So the idea around internal controls is not just to have controls in place. Maybe you have some good controls in place, but how do we enforce them? And by having a full audit trail of enforced rules gives you that stronger level of control over the entire process from receipt of invoice all the way through the final payment. So when we talk to organizations, you'd think that, at this day and age, everybody would have some type of automation tool in place. And here's a study done by Ardent Partners. 43% of organizations in different departments are still manual and paper-driven. With all the technology we have out there today, organizations still have to try to get a handle around, how do I manage this? Sometimes people dip a toe in the water, and maybe they scan their invoices and have it into some type of electronic shared drive that they can access. But sometimes that creates other issues of not having immediate access to pull that up easily. It's also still a lengthy process from the time that we get that invoice in through that final payment. So what happens if I'm not able to process that quickly? And we're not really talking about getting that payment out quicker, but maybe I want to get it out on time. I want to have good relationships with my vendors so that I know where something is at any point in the process, whether it's in the approval process, or maybe I just simply want to close out my month, or I want to report on that spend. These are all things that automation will help you in adding those efficiencies. So you're probably all familiar with a lot of the different steps associated with all of those different tasks that AP is juggling today. So we receive invoices in, we route them through the office, hoping that they remember to get all of the appropriate approvals for each different type of invoice. We have to code them. We have a lot of data entry associated with that. We're answering vendor questions. How did we apply the payment? Or maybe they misapplied the payment, and now we're spending time trying to fix that. Or maybe they got a duplicate payment. Maybe it's other people within the organization who are calling, asking if something was paid because they're trying to order something with their vendor. Or maybe it's getting approval for payment. Maybe the important person who needs to sign off is out of the office, and I still have to now hold on to that for a few more days until they return. Or maybe it's getting those payments out to all of the different vendors. So a lot of times we have to now take those invoices, I have to match it up with the check, I have to get my signatures, and now I have to distribute that out and make sure we can get that to our vendors timely. And then, of course, it doesn't end there. We know that we have to follow up on a lot of those payments, because although that check goes out in the mail, that doesn't mean that that vendor will be processing it. So the idea of automation is to help streamline all of these processes, make them go away so that your team can really be more strategic and have a positive impact. And that doesn't really just positively impact like AP. Again, if we can save 20 to 40 hours every month, that's significant in terms of how they can be of value to the finance team and others within the organization. We think about the board of directors. Maybe they're part of an approval process today, and clearly they're usually not in the office. So sometimes I've heard people that are going and driving to another office, or they're mailing invoices and different things that they want to send to them to give them visibility. What if that person had instant visibility electronically to view things when they needed to see them? If they wanted to understand the expenses for a particular program for a period of time, we can have that information to them instantly. The CFO and controller, they want to understand cash flow. They're making big decisions for the organization. They want to ensure that that information is accurate. I want to be able to understand, what is my accruals to date? All of this is, again, something that gives them the ability to make informed decisions. Program managers, or maybe it's department heads or division managers, they're focused on their programs. They don't want to be bothered with having to take care of paper invoices. And what happens? Sometimes that just sits on their desk. It doesn't become a priority because they really want to devote their time to what's important to them and to those that they're serving. So when we work with organizations, we always want to understand, what are your goals? Is it growth? Are we looking to grow without having to add additional people? Can I work with what I have today? Maybe it's providing additional control over the process. Maybe it's mitigating risk. So a lot of times People might not even think about that, or maybe it is an important area that you're looking into of preventing fraud within the organization, or maybe it's payment fraud we're looking to mitigate. All the time I talk to people who are thinking about talking to their bank about getting rid of checks, and they want to move to electronic payments, but they haven't really found a solution that makes sense because there's a lot involved with processing business payments. It's a little bit different than consumer payments. So these are all things where we work closely with organizations to understand what are your true goals and how can we help you meet those. So when we think about AP automation, or even just in the process in general for processing invoices, there's a number of practices, best practices that we recommend to help improve efficiencies. So we like to think that this is a really great slide for telling a great picture, or telling 1,000 words, right? It's talking about that journey that invoice takes through the organization. This is how we really think about the time spent, about how that moves around the office. So there's a lot of things happening with that piece of paper, or maybe it came in by email. Someone might be printing that email, putting it in the folder, and I'm putting that together with other invoices that may have come in by the mail. I'm figuring out who needs to sign off on these, and I'm trying to track that. Sometimes people are even tracking that in Excel, so they're entering all of that data. Sometimes I'm matching that against a purchase order. Then we have to code this. We have to validate that the coding was done correctly, approve the invoices. Now maybe I want to understand, what are my total expenses so I can make decisions on my budget? Now, of course, there's that data entry into the accounting system. And then once that's entered into the accounting system, we're going to process payments. And that's where that tedious check process comes back into play. And maybe somebody has EFT set up. And hey, I have an electronic payment initiative. I want to help not get those checks out there where that can result in some fraudulent activity. I've done a great job. Well, there's still some even concerns around that with, am I getting all of the remittance detail that vendor needs to apply that payment properly, so I don't have to spend time on the phone with them to sort that out later? And then, of course, we're going to that file cabinet and getting everything filed away. And sometimes people even tell me that they change their filing system because sometimes it's hard to find that backup documentation. Sometimes things get misfiled. Sometimes they get lost. Sometimes someone takes something out and forgets to put it back in. And again, some organizations are spending that time scanning it and putting it onto maybe some type of shared drive. But there's always that time that comes up when we think about, I need to pull that out again, whether it's for an audit, or maybe I just need to research something on that invoice. So I find that I'm running to that file cabinet quite frequently. When we think about an automated solution, the whole idea is to reduce the time it takes to go through this process. And everywhere you see the AvidXchange logo is an area of the process that we can make go away with technology and services that we offer to help validate information. We're going to receive those invoices in electronically. We're going to capture all the detail for you. We're going to validate that detail. We're going to automate the workflow process, and it's going to be rules-based. So whatever that looks like for your organization, we're going to learn about what that looks like so we can ensure that all the people who need to sign off on that are automatically going to receive that in their inbox. Now, your team will still code and approve invoices. No one knows better than your organization how to code. However, we have tools to make that process easy. Those approvals will all be date and time stamped within the application. You'll have a full audit trail. Again, I'll be able to run reports, understand where I am to my budget. Integration with your accounting system. Now, we do list MIP there. However, we do integrate with 140 different accounting systems. So whether it's MIP, Intact, whatever it is, we have an integration so we can pass all of that data, which helps prevent errors and ensures that we don't send any duplicates to the accounting system. We give you a little more control over that process. When it comes to processing payments, we have a simple process that we've created, but we can now initiate payments to your vendors based on how they want to be paid, and we take the pain out of that. You don't have to call up that vendor to find out how they want to be paid. Do they want that payment electronically, or do they still want a check? We can help manage that for you. When we think about filing away invoices, we no longer have to do that because everything started off electronically. So we give you and your team full visibility as soon as it hits that workflow process to understand where is it in the workflow process. Do I need to have something escalated because somebody didn't do it in time? You have full visibility now to understand where something is in the process. If I need to research anything within seconds, I can have instant access to that information. So not only are you gaining control and visibility, we're also reducing the time it takes from when you receive that invoice all the way through the time to have it fully paid. So we have a little tip for you. And a lot of organizations, something that we mentioned is invoices are sometimes going to various areas within the organization, whether that's different locations, different departments, different people's desks. It's not coming to AP first. Our tip is to centralize the invoice process so it all comes to one central person so you can have more control and visibility over anything that's going to be routed through the organization. That allows them to have better planning through their process. So workflow process. So there are some organizations I work with and they know exactly who needs to sign off on everything. They have their business process in place. And there's a lot of organizations that aren't quite sure. Maybe I want to put more control in place. My CFO wants to see certain types of invoices, but they travel often. And it's hard. It's just going to delay the process, so I'm not doing it. So when we onboard our clients, we spend quite a bit of time with you to understand the different entities with your organization. What kind of invoices are you receiving and who needs to be involved in that process? This is something that we tailor for each organization that we work with. And again, there's different types of invoices you receive that go down different paths. So maybe the program manager wants to receive it first. They're going to approve it because maybe they're the person who ordered it. Maybe they'll code it. Then maybe the AP manager wants to make sure they coded it correctly. Maybe if it's over $5,000, maybe a CFO or a controller wants to see it. If I need multiple dollar thresholds and there's different people at higher up levels who also want to see it, maybe if it's only over 10,000, maybe over 20. It's unlimited. We can create the controls that you need in place to match up with your rules-based business process. We can even include a board of directors. If there are maybe over $50,000, all invoices associated with that type of amount that they want to have visibility into, we can even include them into that process as well. But the goal here is, again, to streamline it in a straight line, not going back and forth to people, but in a way that makes sense where we can easily track it regardless of where it is in the process. There's a significant operational impact to the organization. So by reducing the time to process an invoice and get it paid, we can close out the books faster. We have the ability to report on all of that expense. We're not saying, hey, I need to get that payment made quicker, but it allows you to be proactive rather than reactive. I'm not taking a phone call from that vendor asking me where payment is. I'm making decisions on what do I want to pay, how do I want to pay it, and how much do I want to pay today. Maybe I'm only going to pay that deposit. The system also will allow you to set up escalations to make sure that people stay on task. How much time do you spend tapping shoulders? Hey, where's this invoice? I got to get this booked into the accounting system, or I need to get this paid today. What if you can just open up the application and know exactly by due date where everything is in the process and take immediate action so that you never have to worry about late fees anymore? Again, the goal is to give you control and visibility throughout the process by adding these efficiencies where automation now takes over as opposed to a manual paper-based process. So when we also think about this, again, well, how exactly do we reduce the cost or the resources involved with getting my invoice processed and paid? Like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of time that is spent on just moving paper around, fixing errors, having calls with vendors, or even internal people who are asking questions about invoices when, hey, if they can look at that electronically, they can have a self-service option. Maybe my vendors want to have a self-service option to be able to see information about payments so I can avoid those kind of phone calls. All of this time that we can help save your organization has a financial impact to the organization. When we work with organizations, a lot of times they don't understand what is the cost that I am spending today to have an invoice and or payment processed. There's also, again, not only just labor fees associated with that, but there's also hard costs. There's late fees if I'm not able to get things paid on time. I'm constantly struggling to keep up and, again, take calls. Maybe I have a good relationship with my vendor and I am spending that time trying to sweet talk them to get that late fee removed. But when we think about sending out checks, we have a cost with postage, the actual check, ink, stock, all of these things, all of this paper that, again, we're printing, we're scanning, all of that starts adding up significantly, making it very costly to process an invoice. And what does that all stem from is really going back to that paper. Paper is costly. So first, we're having it come in. Maybe I get my invoice in by email. Sometimes I'm then printing it, creating more paper. Sometimes I'm scanning it and sending it to someone else so they can print it, put their signature on it, send it back again. And now I am maybe scanning it in again. Or maybe I'm printing all of the approvals that I have so I can have all that backup detail. Maybe there's additional attachments that I have to have associated with that invoice. Maybe somebody is stamping these invoices and handwriting on there the coding, and not everybody has the greatest handwriting, and that can sometimes result in errors. What if we had, again, that all electronic? Even when we think about payments, all of that paper, those paper checks going out, it becomes expensive. So that's why people are really thinking about, how do I implement an electronic payment system, but I still need to get remittance detail out. I want to make sure that it's easy. I don't really want my team spending time on figuring out, how do my vendors want to be paid? So again, by getting rid of the paper, we automatically give your team back significant time. And again, that time goes back to relate to the cost of processing invoices and payments. There's a ton of studies out there today, and this is a pretty conservative one. And essentially, when we think about all of the time, and again, we think about 20, 40, 60 hours every month that is going into processing a manual paper process, $15 per invoice. And a payment is actually costing just over $7 per payment to get that out the door. So when we think about what does this cost for processing paper and paper checks, almost $22. When we automate, that will reduce the cost up to 60%. Again, that allows your team to now focus on things that are more strategic, that time on things that have value to the organization, and ultimately have a greater impact. So we thought we'd put a little funny in here to make you laugh this afternoon. But essentially what this comes down to, when people think about automation, they have fear. Because what does automation relate to? I'm going to lose control. And maybe I'm going to lose people. These are two things that are actually the complete opposite. By automation, I have built in business rules on permissions, on what somebody is going to do in the application. Everything is marked with a date and time stamp. You make decisions on how something will flow through a workflow process, and it's all predefined. So when we think about that audit process, separation of duties, I have control over what anyone can do or see in the application. We give visibility to those who need visibility, and we can restrict what they can see also within the application. When we think about payments, we don't take away your ability to make decisions on your payments. You have complete control over that. What we're doing, again, is taking away the tedious manual tasks associated with getting that payment out the door, following up on that payment, understanding your vendors and how they want to be paid. So the goal of automation is to give you significantly greater control over the process by having it defined electronically, as well as those permissions, have a very detailed audit trail, and again, give visibility to those within the organization who need it. So when we think about visibility, what does it look like in the application? We want something that is going to be visually appealing because we don't want people to print it. The whole idea is that we want this to be an electronic form that makes sense. So it's a very simple to use application that gives you full visibility to the entire invoice image, whether it's 1 page or 100. We can see all of the coding. All of that header detail has been extracted for you. That's helped defining the workflow process it takes. All of your coding is tailored for your organization. All of your comments, attachments, the workflow, I can see where it is in the process. I can also see the entire audit trail to date as it's going through the process. So again, it's about visibility and making it easy for folks to be able to simply approve and move on with their day. So when we think about who's involved in that approval process, very often a lot of people in the organization today are traveling more and more. They're meeting with different funders or traveling to conferences, doing things for the organization to move it forward. And when we think about it, we can't go anywhere today without somebody having their phone in front of them. And people expect today to be able to do anything regardless of where they're located. So regardless of any type of application that you look into today, it is super important to be able to have a mobile access for your team. If you have people that work from home, if they're traveling, if they're on vacation and they've not gone on vacation for so many years because they come back to a mess or because they need to be involved in some type of approval process, regardless of where anyone is located, they can simply review invoices, they can review payments and sign off on those payments and know that they've seen all that detail associated with it and they can still be part of the process. Back to that audit process again. Well, how exactly do I pull up invoices in the application? You told me it was easy. How easy is it? Well, we have this electronic file cabinet that you can simply search by a number of different filters, any of those code segments, whether it's fund, program, project, you can sort by any of those. I can do it by dates, by supplier. When I think about my audit process, I can even give my auditor read-only access. We don't charge by user licenses, so I can create as many types of users with unique permissions as I need to. And that auditor can now see any invoice record with the entire audit trail. If someone had the ability to make a change, it'll show what it was before, what it was after, who did it, date and time. All of the comments, the attachments, all of that backup detail, all of my cleared checks or electronic payment detail, all of that is available where they can have access to that in seconds. If you're not comfortable giving an auditor read-only access, you can simply, in minutes, create a PDF report of all of that detail, that entire audit trail, the coding, the distributions, the header detail, the invoice image. You determine what prints on that report, and now within minutes, I have it ready for my audit, and I can then focus on other things that are important to the organization. Also, when I think about board members or other stakeholders in the organization who want read-only access, I want them to look, but I certainly don't want them to touch. They'll have the ability with different types of permissions to view invoices within the application. And like we talked about earlier, you can set up restrictions. If you have confidential documents that are associated with the finance department, we can restrict anyone from accessing anything associated with the finance department. If you want program managers to see invoices associated with their programs, we can restrict that as well. The idea is to follow those business rules that you need in order to meet your compliance requirements. So what is the true impact of automation? It's visibility, control, compliance, all of these different things to give you and your team more control over the process, reduce the time it takes so that you can close your month out, be proactive about processing your payments, and again, saving time that can be focused on things that are more strategic to the organization. So who exactly is AvidXchange? So AvidXchange, it's when you're thinking about the vendor you want to partner with, it's really important to understand who they are as a company. We've now been in business for 18 years. Our sole focus is on AP automation. All of our clients, all we do is support their efforts to be successful, and as their organization changes, we work closely with you to make sure that you're optimizing the system. So we have a lot of support resources that are dedicated to keeping our clients happy. We've grown from about just under 300 employees to 1,200 over the last 3.5 years. Yeah, AP automation is becoming a hot topic right now. And people will ask me, well, how do you still support your clients if you've grown so much so fast? Well, every time we put in new agreements, we can see how much new volume are we going to be processing? How many people do I need to have on staff to support processing those new invoices? We're services oriented, whether it's payments or making sure invoices get processed through the application into the workflow process. These are people that we hire to support our clients. Now, something exciting is with this growth, and how did we grow so big in 3 years? We've had over $550 million invested in our organization through a number of strategic partners. One of them is MasterCard, KeyBank. A number of banks are starting to knock on our door asking us, we want to be part of what you're doing. They think what we're doing in terms of processing payments is pretty exciting. We're doing something different than any other organization is out there. We're one of the very few mid-market organizations that have a full procure through payment application, and we do not outsource any aspect of that. So as you're thinking about who you want to partner with, these are all important things. When we think about our continued growth, we have a lot of strategic partners that are now working with us to help with our strategic vision. It's important to know that we're going to continue to innovate. We are now one of the highest mid-market fintech companies, the most highly funded fintech company in the country right now. So we're doing something right, and it's a pretty exciting time to be part of our company. So when we think about kind of a recap of information that we've covered today, and again, it could be AvidXchange and MIP Fund Accounting, or it could be Intact, or a number of other accounting systems. The goal here, through adding efficiencies to the AP process, is the ability to receive 100% of your invoices electronically, facilitate data capture on all of those invoices coming in, so your team doesn't want to remove that data entry, and we want to pass that data to your accounting system. We want to enhance workflows with conditions and match up with your business process. We tailor that so that you're in compliance. Integration with your accounting system, being able to pass a link of that invoice image to MIP or your accounting system so that you don't have to open up Avid to see, if you're in the accounting system, what that invoice record looks like. And be able to facilitate payments on your behalf, keeping in mind that control stays on your end. You determine what you process and how you process it. We take care of the rest on the back end. And again, regardless of what your supplier, how they want to receive payment, is it a virtual card? Is it those funds are going to be deposited into their bank account or simply a check? You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to manage that in your accounting system. These are all things that we manage in our payment network. We have the known payment preferences for almost 450,000 vendors already. So it is growing. And we have nearly a 40% adoption rate with those who already accept electronic payments today. This is where we see a lot of growth today. Vendors want to be able to process payments easily and quickly, and our clients want to be able to send payments securely, and they also want to make sure that it's easy, that process, all of those steps that are associated with processing a payment, whether it's by check or electronic, I need it to be easy. I need my reconciliation process to stay the same. Through automation, these are all things that at AvidXchange, we've created a unique mix of technology and services to help support our clients achieve these goals. So kind of to recap, how does this affect the entire team, your board of directors, or any other stakeholder who wants to understand what's going on with your organization? We can give them access to real-time information. Think about the transparency that I'm able to show, hey, I have no problem sharing any of this information with you because I am a good steward of those funds. Your AP manager can save up to 50% of their time so they can focus on things that are of value to the finance team. And again, if they have multiple tasks, maybe it's just to complete their job so they're happy. They don't feel overworked all the time or having to take work home with them. Someone told me they put their invoices in a suitcase and would bring it home at night. That's just crazy. Your CFO and your controller, they want to have insight into your spend, into the budget, so that they can make decisions for the organization. They want to reduce fraud, reduce that risk to the organization. That's where control really matters, and visibility. Your program managers, they really just want to focus on their programs. They want to do a good job there. They don't want to have to deal with managing that paper associated with having to sign off on invoices. But if I can access that electronically and make it easy and know, hey, I can just log on, take care of it, and call it a day. Or if I need to pull something up, I can quickly pull it up within seconds. I can see if something's been paid. Or I can report on that information. It's really giving that greater visibility to a number of people within the organization so that they can make the best decisions, again, for the organization to help with those goals, which could be continued growth. So the whole goal here is to imagine what you could do with that time. If we can automate this, think about it in an electronic world. No matter where it is, I know that I can click in and see where any invoice is in the process or the status of any payment. And I think we are now at the Q&A session, so hopefully you have all thought of some great questions that we can help address for you.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you to our attendees for sticking around. I just launched the poll, so if you all could take a few minutes to answer. While we give everyone time to answer the poll, we will begin to take any questions that you may have. And we have a few questions that have already come in. So Pam, the first question is there a threshold in terms of invoices per month that typically makes sense to consider automation?
So when we think about the resources that someone has on hand, that's first and foremost important. If today your accountant or a CFO is the person processing invoices, maybe automation makes sense if you have 50 or 100 invoices. However, I would say that the majority of clients have probably 150 or more invoices that they're processing each month where it starts to begin to make sense for them. And that's not to say, again, we have sometimes clients that are smaller. Again, it depends on what kind of resources, who's taking care of that today. If I have an AP person who's not completely taxed, again, it's really based on the resources that you have in place, but it usually starts about 150 invoices where it starts making sense.
Great, thank you, Pam. We have another question, and they'd like to know, how does the invoice payment information get into your accounting system?
So what's amazing about the technology that we've created in payments, and it's completely unique, when you process those payments from your accounting system, whether you cut a check internally or you process it through our application, your accounting system will automatically identify that as being processed and paid. Within the application, you can see what kind of payment did your vendor accept. Did they take an electronic payment, or did they take a check? We can see when it was issued, and we can see the status of that payment. And in addition, your vendors can access a portal, and they can see invoices they've submitted to you, and they can see the payments you've associated with that. So remittance detail is fully part of that program to ensure that vendors are applying those payments properly, so we don't have to worry about taking those phone calls about them having misapplied a payment.
Thank you, Pam. The next question is, do we have the ability to set up workflows with specific approvers for different types of invoices?
So absolutely. You know, the workflow design is, and again, like we talked about on our onboarding plan, our project managers work very closely with organizations. It's about identifying what are the entities associated with your organization. Are those departments? Do you have multiple buildings associated with your organization? Do I have different locations? Think about first and foremost what those entities are and who's associated with that workflow process, who needs to sign off on it and approve it. So we tailor this based on different types of invoices. A utility invoice might take a different path than different supplies that were ordered for a particular type of program. So it's important for us to understand what do your invoices look like, who's involved in that approval process so that we can tailor the system to match up with your business process.
Thanks, Pam. The next question is, do you have a list of all accounting software you integrate with?
So we do. On our website, you'll see a number of the partnerships that we have established integrations with. And that's not to say if for some reason you don't see an accounting system that you're working with there. We partner with a lot of organizations. You know, accounting systems do a great job for you for certain things. The goal for ART's tools is to really enhance the benefits that you have in your accounting system today. So we're never replacing AP in the accounting system. We are integrating with it to give you enhanced reporting capabilities, additional visibility, additional controls, right, through that audit trail. So that's why we actually partner with so many different accounting systems, because that's usually not the focus for accounting. There's a gazillion things probably on your wish list that you want your accounting system to do. So accounting system publishers, that's what they're focusing on. And then they partner with companies like AvidXchange, who have already put together a really great solution to help with challenges associated with processing invoices.
Great. The next question is, if you are printing or mailing out checks on behalf of your clients, how do you handle signing the checks?
That is a great question, and I just realized when I've been talking about control, I did not really bring up the fact that anytime you submit a payment and want to send that to the AvidPay network, it goes through an approval process first. So rather than signing a check, we're going to give you the ability to send this to one or two people if dual signatures are required based on the amount of that payment. That person will have visibility to see the bank account it's coming from, the entity it's associated with. They can see the invoice image. They can see the detail. And now, regardless of where that payment signer is, they can access that electronically, approve it. That is now part of my audit trail in the application, and I can report on that easily from my auditor. So again, it's not a check signing, it's an approval that's going to be electronic in the application. And something exciting, you know, I worked with an organization last summer, and their boss was a little old school. They brought a consultant in, and she kind of pushed them into automation, saying, we need this. And he liked the idea of having paper in his hands. And there's a lot of organizations that like to touch it. They want to sign it. And 6 months later, she said he does not want a single payment going through that does not go through our application, because he loves the control, the audit trail, and you have fraud protection regardless of the payment method that is issued through our application. And if it is a check that your vendor chooses to accept, we have full positive pay associated with it. So again, we're protecting any payment method that goes through our process. Great question.
Going off of that, we have another question. If we have specific signers on file with a bank, who signs the check?
So what we would do is when we set up clients on our payment application, we set up a joinder agreement. So it's not by vendor, right? It's the one person who's going to be AvidXchange. And that's going to allow us to be able to draw funds to pay for the payments. What we're doing, though, is when we create workflows for payments, we're going to associate the correct people with the certain that are associated with those bank accounts, right? So those people are responsible for signing off on checks, maybe with this particular program or some aspect of the organization. So we create a workflow very specific to ensure their approval. And I hope I'm answering that correctly. But it's our joinder agreement that allows us to pull funds that get used to make those payments when you send them to us.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pam. And that is all the time we have for today for questions. Again, I would like to thank everyone for attending our webinar on how to improve efficiency with invoice and payment automation. If there are any questions that were not addressed during the Q&A, someone from AvidXchange will follow up with you after the webinar. We will also follow up with any individuals who've requested to see a demo or would like more information on AP automation. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you all again for joining, and we'll be sending this information out shortly.